You think you can walk away from me? His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Sarah stood in the middle of the grand living room, staring at him. The power in his voice was undeniable, yet there was something softer in his eyes, something that didn't belong. The mafia boss, Daniel, had always been a mystery to her. But in that moment, standing before him, she realized how deep his hold on her had gone. She had rejected him once, thinking she could escape the world he controlled. Now, here she was, caught between fear and a strange pull that kept drawing her back to him. She had always told herself that she was different, that she could stay away from men like him. But the reality was, she couldn't. Daniel's world was dangerous, filled with shadows she couldn't understand, and yet, there was something in his presence that made her feel safe, even when she knew she shouldn't. The air between them was thick with tension. She knew this conversation, this moment, was inevitable. She couldn't keep pretending that she wasn't drawn to him, to the life he offered, even if it was fraught with danger. I thought I could, she said, her voice trembling despite herself. But now I'm not so sure. His gaze softened, and for a moment, it was like the walls around him cracked. He took a step closer, and Sarah felt the weight of his presence. He didn't touch her, but the space between them seemed to shrink with each passing second. You can't escape me, he said, his voice low, almost regretful. And I'm not letting you go. Sarah swallowed hard, her heart racing. She wanted to push him away, to run, but she knew it was pointless. She had already made her choice, and in some twisted way, she was already a part of his world. The power he held over her was undeniable, but it wasn't just his control that kept her coming back. It was the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing that mattered, like she was the only thing he couldn't control. It made her feel vulnerable, and yet, in his presence, it was hard to resist the pull to stay. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to look him in the eye. You think I'm just another pawn in your game, don't you? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze flickered with something unreadable before he spoke, his voice quiet, but filled with certainty. No, he said, his tone firm. I think you're the one thing in my life I can't control, and that terrifies me. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Sarah felt a flicker of something real. It was the first time she'd heard him admit it, the first time he had let down his guard. She couldn't deny the way her heart skipped a beat, the way the walls she had built around herself started to crumble. Daniel had always been a man of control, a man who never let anyone close. And yet, here he was, exposing a part of himself he never showed to anyone else. And it was in that moment that Sarah knew. This wasn't just about the mafia, the secrets, or the danger. This was about something deeper, something that neither of them could avoid, no matter how hard they tried. Sarah sat in the small coffee shop, her fingers wrapped around the warm cup, the steam rising into the cool morning air. It should have been comforting, the quiet, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the hum of conversation around her, but it wasn't. Her mind kept drifting back to him, to Daniel. After everything that had happened, after she'd rejected him, she had expected some sense of relief, some peace of mind. But it never came. Every time she thought she had moved on, every time she told herself that it was for the best, his face, his words, would find their way back into her thoughts. It was maddening. She couldn't escape him. She didn't want to. She glanced down at her phone, almost expecting it to buzz with a message from him. She had been avoiding his calls, trying to put space between them, but there was always that part of her that wanted to reach out, that wanted to know if he was okay. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't give in. He had his own world, one full of lies, secrets, and shadows, and she had no place in it. But why did it feel like she was already part of it? She sighed, rubbing her temples, trying to push away the thoughts. She took another sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through her. Just then, her phone buzzed in her hand. It wasn't from Daniel. It was a text from her best friend, Mia. Asterisk. Hey, I saw Vincent at the club last night. He's been asking about you. Asterisk. Sarah frowned at the message, unsure of how to respond. Mia had always been good at keeping her in the loop about things, but there was something about Vincent that unsettled her. He was another of Daniel's associates, someone who was always too eager to be friendly with Sarah, even when she didn't want him to be. She had no intention of getting involved in Vincent's world, just as she had no intention of getting involved in Daniel's. But despite her best efforts, She found herself constantly surrounded by people who were connected to him, who knew things she wasn't supposed to know. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had been trying so hard to keep herself away from everything Daniel represented, but every time she took a step back, something or someone pulled her right back in. Her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice cautious. "Sarah," came the low, familiar voice. It was Daniel. Her heart skipped a beat, and she had to take a deep breath to steady herself. "We need to talk," he said, his tone so calm it sent a chill through her. She wanted to say no, to hang up and pretend she had never answered, but instead, she found herself responding. "I'm busy." "You're never too busy for me," he replied, his voice smooth, almost like a command. She gritted her teeth, anger bubbling beneath the surface, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere near you or your world, Daniel." He chuckled softly on the other end of the line, the sound sending a shiver down her spine. "You already are, Sarah. Whether you admit it or not, you're already deeper into this than you think." She clenched her fist around the phone, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. He was right. She couldn't deny it. She was already involved, whether she wanted to be or not. "Don't call me again," she said firmly, her voice cold. There was a long pause on the other. And before he spoke again, his words laced with something darker. "You'll answer when I call, Sarah. You can't escape me." The call ended abruptly, and she was left holding the phone, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. She stared at the screen for a moment, wondering how long it would take before she gave in. She wasn't sure if she hated him or still loved him, but one thing was for sure, there was no going back now. Sarah sat at the small wooden desk, her eyes scanning the pages of a book she wasn't really reading. Her mind kept drifting back to Daniel and the conversation they had last night. The sound of the city outside filtered through the window, but all she could hear was the steady beat of her own heart, racing whenever she thought about him. She didn't want to think about him, didn't want to let him back into her life after everything he had done. But even now, she could still feel the weight of his presence, the power in his gaze, the way he had made her feel both safe and terrified at the same time. Her phone buzzed on the desk, and she jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. She had been expecting this, though she had tried to convince herself she wasn't. She picked it up, hesitating for a moment before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you not to call me," she added, her frustration creeping into her tone. "You know I don't listen to people who try to push me away," Daniel replied, his voice as smooth as always, though there was something darker in it now, something that made her pulse quicken. "I never asked for this, Daniel." "You don't get to control me," Sarah said, her words more forceful now, though the unease in her chest wouldn't go away. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he spoke again, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that sent a chill down her spine. "You're already a part of my world, Sarah, whether you like it or not." She could feel the truth of his words, even though she hated it. She didn't want to be a part of his world, didn't want to be tied to him in any way, but the reality was undeniable. She couldn't seem to escape him, and every time she thought she had, he found a way to pull her back. The truth was, despite all her attempts to push him away, she couldn't get rid of the feeling that she needed him. That part of her was still drawn to him, to the life he lived. It terrified her. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice faltering slightly. "Because I won't let you go," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I've been patient, but I'm done waiting." His words sent a shiver through her, and despite herself, she felt a rush of warmth spread through her. She hated that she was still affected by him, still feeling the pull of his words. "You can't keep doing this," she whispered. "You can't keep making decisions for me." "I'm not making decisions for you, Sarah," Daniel replied, his tone soft but firm. "I'm offering you a choice. You can walk away, but I know you won't." "Not really." The certainty in his voice made her stomach twist, and she realized he was right. She couldn't walk away. Not from him, not from the world he was pulling her into, no matter how much she wanted to. She had never been good at resisting him, and it seemed she was still failing, even now. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I can't be a part of your world." "Then why are you still here?" Daniel's voice was quiet, almost tender, as if he were trying to get her to admit something she wasn't ready to face. Sarah closed her eyes, unable to answer him, because the truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know why she couldn't walk away, why she couldn't escape the gravity of his presence. She had tried, and yet here she was, still tethered to him. And deep down, she feared that, no matter how hard she tried, she would never truly be free. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy, and she knew that something had shifted between them, something that could never be undone. And in that moment, she understood, she wasn't just caught up in his world. She was already a part of it, and there was no going back. Sarah stood by the window, staring out at the city lights below. The night was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional rustle of paper as she moved through the papers spread out on the table. But her thoughts weren't on the work in front of her. They were still with him. With Daniel. After the phone call earlier, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into a storm she couldn't escape. He had warned her, hadn't he? That she couldn't walk away from him. And despite everything inside her screaming to stay away, she found herself thinking about his words more and more. She had tried to convince herself that she could leave him behind, that she could move on with her life and leave his dangerous world behind. But the truth was, she wasn't sure she could. Not anymore. She thought about the first time they had met, how different everything had felt then. She hadn't known the depths of his world then, hadn't known the danger that followed him everywhere. But now, she could feel it in the air around her, a presence that seemed to haunt her every waking moment. She was in too deep, and there was no easy way out. The phone buzzed on the table, and Sarah jumped, her heart racing. She looked at the screen, her breath catching when she saw his name. For a moment, she debated whether or not to answer. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to keep him out of her life, but she knew she couldn't. Not really. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone. Sarah. Daniel's voice came through, smooth and calm, just like it always did. But there was something different this time, something darker in the way he spoke. We need to talk. I don't have anything else to say to you, Sarah replied, her voice firm but shaking slightly. You can't keep doing this. I told you, he said, his tone unchanging. You're already a part of my world. You can try to walk away, but you won't. Not for long. Sarah clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. He was right. She had tried to leave, but every time, something pulled her back in. I'm not like the others, she said, her voice rising slightly. I don't belong in your world. Yes, you do, Daniel said. And she could almost hear the certainty in his voice. You belong with me. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Sarah didn't know how to respond. She wanted to scream, to push him away, but something inside her stopped her. He had a hold on her, a grip that was too tight to break free from. I won't let you go, Daniel added, his voice softer now, almost like a plea. I can't lose you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at his words. She didn't want to hear this, didn't want to feel this way, but it was impossible to ignore. He wasn't just a man she could walk away from. He was someone who had a part of her, whether she liked it or not. You don't get to decide what happens to me, she said, trying to sound strong. But deep down, she knew it was too late. He already had. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again. I've already made my choice, Sarah, he said, his voice steady once more. And you're a part of it. The finality in his words left no room for argument. She could fight it, but she knew, deep down, that she wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't sure what this meant for her, or for them, but one thing was certain, there was no escaping him now. And for the first time, Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to. Not anymore. Sarah stood at the edge of the balcony, looking out at the city lights. The soft hum of the city below was almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts in her mind. She could still feel Daniel's presence, even now. His words echoed in her head, lingering like a shadow she couldn't shake off. You're a part of my world. The phrase kept repeating, and every time she heard it, it seemed to pull her deeper into his world, into the chaos and the danger that she had tried so hard to avoid. But now, she wasn't so sure she wanted to. A soft breeze blew through the night, making her hair sway gently. She could almost feel the weight of the decision she was facing. Every step she took away from him felt like a step toward an unknown. And the closer she got to the edge of that unknown, the more she realized how little she knew about herself without him. He had made her question everything she thought she knew about control, power, and safety. She glanced down at her phone, half expecting to see another message from him. But there was nothing. Just the usual notifications. Sarah let out a small sigh, setting her phone on the railing beside her. She wasn't sure what she expected. She had been avoiding his calls for days now. It was like playing a game, trying to ignore the obvious pull between them. But with every passing day, it became harder to resist. "What am I doing?" she muttered to herself, her voice barely audible against the wind. She had never been someone to lose control, but when it came to him, it felt like she was losing everything. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke to her, everything about him made her feel like she was in too deep, and yet, the part of her that was drawn to him refused to let go. Just then, her phone buzzed again, the familiar name lighting up the screen. Daniel. She stared at it for a moment before picking it up. "Sarah." His voice came through, smooth, but with an edge that made her heart race. "You've been avoiding me." She didn't answer right away, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. "I'm not avoiding you," she said finally, trying to sound confident. "I'm just trying to figure things out." He chuckled softly, the sound almost too familiar, like it had always been there. "You don't need to figure anything out, Sarah," he said. "You already know what you want. You just won't admit it yet." His words struck a chord deep within her, and she felt her resolve falter. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to be this vulnerable, but there was no denying the truth. A part of her, a part she had buried deep down, did want him. "I can't just jump back in, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your world is dangerous. It's not a place I can live in." "It's already too late for that," he replied, his voice softer now, almost comforting. "You're already in it, whether you like it or not." She closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cool glass of the balcony. His words sent a chill through her. How could he be so sure? How could he know what was going on in her mind when she wasn't even sure herself? "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "You," he said simply, the word hanging heavy in the air. "I've always wanted you, Sarah. I just didn't know how to make you understand." His words made her heart skip a beat. She wanted to tell him to go away, to leave her alone, but the truth was, she couldn't. She couldn't push him out of her life, not when every part of her seemed to be drawn to him, to his world. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to get hurt." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice gentle, almost tender. "I'm not going to hurt you, Sarah. But I can't promise that everything will be easy. You're right to be scared, but sometimes, we have to face our fears head on." Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The pull between them was undeniable, but so was the fear. The fear of the unknown. The fear of being swallowed by his world. But as she stood there, feeling the wind whip through her hair, she realized something. She couldn't keep running. Not anymore. The decision wasn't about whether she was ready or not. It was about what she was willing to risk for the chance at something real. "I'm not running anymore," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I'll face it. I'll face you." There was a moment of silence, and then, in the quiet of the night, Daniel's voice returned, filled with something close to relief. "Good. I knew you would." Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as she stared out the window. The sun had set, and the city lights flickered in the distance, but inside, all she could focus on was the whirlwind Daniel had dragged her into. She had spent so much time trying to convince herself that she was strong enough to walk away, to leave his world behind. But now, sitting here, she realized how much of that world had already become hers. The phone in front of her buzzed again, the screen lighting up with his name. She stared at it for a long moment before finally reaching for it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed the green button, bringing the phone to her ear. "Sarah." Daniel's voice greeted her, calm and smooth as always. But there was something different in it now. A hint of urgency. "You're still avoiding me." She didn't respond immediately. How could she? There was nothing left to say. She had spent so many nights thinking about this moment, wondering how she would react when he called again. And now, when it was happening, she realized she didn't have the strength to push him away anymore. "I'm not avoiding you," she finally said, her voice shaking slightly. I don't know what you want from me." "I've told you what I want," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "I want you. All of you. There's no more running, no more hiding from what's between us." His words sent a jolt of electricity through her, and she bit her lip to stop herself from responding too quickly. She couldn't let him think she was weak, that she was falling for his game. But deep down, she knew she was already in too deep. "You don't get to decide what happens to me," Sarah said, her voice firming, though it felt like she was lying to herself. "I'm not a part of your world, Daniel. You can't just pull me in whenever you want." She could hear him exhale softly on the other end of the line, like he was just waiting for her to understand. "You already are, Sarah," he said, his tone softer now, but no less determined. "You've been a part of this world since the moment we met. And whether you like it or not, I won't let you go." She felt a chill run down her spine at his words. There it was again, the weight of his control, the power he held over her. She hated how much he had already changed her life. But she also knew she couldn't escape him. Not now. Not after everything. "You don't know what you're asking me to do," she whispered. "You don't know what it would mean for me to be with you, Daniel. The danger, the lies, everything." "I do know," he replied, his voice low and intense. "I know exactly what I'm asking. And I'm not asking you to do anything you're not already doing. You just need to admit it to yourself." Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest now, her breath coming in quick bursts. He was right. She had already admitted it to herself. She was already tangled up in his world, and there was no way to untangle herself without breaking something in the process. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was that, even though she knew what it would cost her, she still wanted him. "I can't keep doing this," she said, the words finally escaping her lips. "I can't keep pretending that I'm strong enough to walk away from you. But I'm scared, Daniel. I'm scared of what this means for me. For us." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, almost tender. "I'm not asking you to walk away from yourself, Sarah," he said. "I'm asking you to trust me. To trust that, whatever this is, we can figure it out together. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be with me." She closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her, and for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a future in this world he had drawn her into. A future where she didn't have to be afraid of him or the life he led. But it was still so hard to let go of the fear, to admit that she was already in love with him, and that he had already won. "I don't know if I can do this," Sarah whispered, barely audible. "But I want to try." And in that moment, she knew she had just made the decision that would change everything. The one she had been avoiding all this time. The one that would lead her deeper into his world, with no way back. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Sarah stared at the screen of her phone, her thumb hovering over the text message she had just received. It was from Daniel, as always. She could feel her pulse quicken as her mind raced. How could she continue living like this, torn between the desire to move on and the constant pull he had on her? Her fingers tightened around the phone, but she still didn't know how to respond. She had spent the entire day trying to convince herself that walking away was the right thing to do, but everything kept drawing her back to him. She had spent months trying to outrun this connection, trying to push him out of her thoughts, but with every passing day, the harder it became. She had never expected to feel this way. She had always prided herself on being independent, on being able to make her own choices, but when it came to Daniel, it was as though she lost all control. He had taken up space in her mind, in her heart, in a way she couldn't explain. The pull between them was magnetic, even if she knew it was dangerous. As she sat there, looking at the screen, she realized she couldn't keep pretending. She couldn't keep pretending that she didn't want to be a part of his world, even if it meant everything she had known before would be turned upside down. She had already lost so much of herself in this, but there was no turning back now. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. This time, the message was clear. "We need to talk." It was a simple text, but it sent a wave of panic through her. She had been avoiding him for days, telling herself she could walk away, but now it seemed like the inevitable had come. She couldn't delay it anymore. Her heart beat faster, and she stood up, pacing back and forth in the small living room. She had to make a decision. She couldn't keep running away from this. She knew what she had to do, but the fear of what lay ahead kept her frozen. She had no idea what to expect from the conversation, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about her, about whether she would let him continue to shape her world, or whether she could find a way to break free from the grip he had on her. She grabbed her coat and left the apartment, her mind racing with every step she took. When she arrived at his place, the familiar sense of foreboding filled her. She stood at the door, hesitating for a moment before finally knocking. Daniel opened the door almost immediately, as though he had been waiting for her. His presence filled the space, and for a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. His eyes met hers, and she felt that familiar mixture of fear and desire flood her chest. "Come in," he said, his voice low and steady. She followed him inside, but the moment she crossed the threshold, the tension between them grew. She didn't know what to say, how to explain what she was feeling. "I've been waiting for you," Daniel said, his tone softer than usual, almost vulnerable. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had never seen this side of him before, this openness, this rawness. For a moment, it made her want to step closer, to let him in. But then she remembered everything that had happened. "You don't get to control me," she said, her voice firm, though it shook with uncertainty. Daniel's eyes softened, but his expression remained unreadable. "I never wanted to control you, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "But I can't let you go. Not now." His words hit her harder than she expected, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The weight of his confession settled over her, and the walls she had so carefully built around herself began to crumble. She could feel the emotions rising, overwhelming her. She wanted to push him away, to run, but she couldn't. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be with you." "You don't have to know," he said, stepping closer. "Just trust me, and let me show you." She didn't know if she could, but as he reached out, his hand resting lightly on her arm, she felt her resistance start to fade. This was the moment where everything would change, and she had no idea what to expect. All she knew was that, for better or worse, she wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. Sarah sat on the couch, her fingers nervously tapping against the armrest. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and desire. She had promised herself that she would never let herself be pulled back into Daniel's world. Yet here she was, in his apartment, feeling the pull again, even though she knew the consequences. She had let her guard down once, and now she wasn't sure if she could stop herself from falling into the same trap. Daniel stood by the window, his back turned to her. She watched him, the familiar tension between them lingering in the air. The way he moved, the way his presence filled the room, it was impossible to ignore. He turned to face her, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, Sarah could see something softer in his gaze, something that made her heart ache. It was the vulnerability she had never expected from him, the side of him that he rarely showed to anyone. "Sarah," Daniel said, his voice low and steady. She could tell he was trying to gauge her reaction, to see if she would finally give in. "You don't have to be afraid of me." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. She wanted to tell him that she wasn't afraid, that she didn't need his protection, that she could walk away from everything he represented. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she could. "I'm not afraid of you," she finally said, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. "But I am afraid of what this will do to me." Daniel took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. She could feel the heat between them, the unspoken tension that had been building since the moment they first met. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, and Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," Daniel said, his voice softer now. "I just want you to let me in. Let me show you that there's more to my world than just danger and power." Sarah shook her head, her thoughts still clouded with doubt. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "You've lied to me, Daniel. You've kept things from me. How can I trust you now?" He sighed, stepping back slightly, his expression darkening. "I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "But I'm not asking you to forget them. I'm asking you to see me for who I really am." Sarah looked away, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he had changed, but the fear was still there. Fear of being hurt, of being caught in the same destructive cycle. "I can't just forget everything, Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just pretend that nothing happened." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to forget," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to move forward with me. I know I've hurt you, but I want to make it right." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Sarah's heart was torn, each part of her screaming in different directions. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that he wasn't the man he once was. But a part of her was still scared, still unsure of what it meant to truly let him back into her life. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath and stood up. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if she was ready to take that next step, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep running from this. From him. She walked toward him, her steps slow but determined. When she reached him, she looked up into his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I don't know if I can fully forgive you," she said softly, "but I'm willing to try." Daniel's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw something in him that wasn't just control or power. It was hope. Hope that, maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken. "That's all I ask, Sarah," he said quietly. "That's all I need." She nodded slowly, her heart still uncertain, but opening just a little more. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face it. Together. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Sarah stood by the window, her hands resting on the cold glass as she looked out at the city below. The lights seemed distant, almost like a different world, one that she had no part in. Yet, she couldn't ignore the fact that she was now deeper in Daniel's world than she had ever thought possible. The feelings she tried so hard to suppress, to deny, had surfaced again. The moment they had shared, the tentative steps they had taken toward each other, still lingered in her mind. She couldn't forget his words, the way he had looked at her. She was no longer sure what was real or what was simply the pull of desire that had always existed between them. The decision she had made was still fresh in her mind. She had chosen to stay, chosen to face the uncertainties that came with being with him, with being part of his life. But was it the right choice? She wasn't sure. The world he belonged to was still dangerous, unpredictable, and full of shadows. But there was a part of her that believed in the man he was trying to become. And maybe, just maybe, there was something worth fighting for in this chaotic world of his. A soft knock at the door broke her from her thoughts. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. She already knew who it was. Daniel. She took a deep breath and walked over to the door, opening it to find him standing there, as composed as ever. His eyes softened when they met hers, and for a moment, the weight of everything seemed to vanish. It was just the two of them. No mafia, no lies, just the connection they shared. "You're still here," he said, his voice low, almost like a statement more than a question. Sarah nodded, her heart beating faster as she met his gaze. She wanted to say something, to explain how complicated everything felt, but the words wouldn't come. She didn't need to speak, though. Daniel's expression told her everything she needed to know. He was waiting for her to let him in, for her to take the next step. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, her voice more sure now. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, she was willing to face it with him. "Good," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of his body, the familiarity of his presence. She didn't back away. Instead, she reached out, her hand trembling slightly as it touched his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a promise, a vow that she was ready to move forward. Daniel's hand slid into hers, his fingers gently lacing with hers, and for a moment, it felt like everything in the world had fallen into place. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice softer now. "Together." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew that they would face it together. She was no longer running, no longer hiding from the truth of her feelings. Daniel wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but they were willing to try, to see where this would go. And for the first time, Sarah believed that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real from the chaos they had found themselves in. As they stood there, their fingers intertwined, Sarah knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. And she wasn't sure if she ever wanted to.